Hello and welcome to OEC's Legislative Session Debrief. I'm Jana Gastellum, Oregon Environmental Council's Executive Director. It's really wonderful to see all of you joining today. Today, we want to take you on an inside look at the 2025 long legislative session. For those of you who are members and action takers with OEC, thank you so much for your support and engagement. You're what motivates us and keeps us moving forward. For those of you who are new to OEC, welcome. We are a statewide environmental nonprofit with membership throughout Oregon. We specialize in impactful and equitable public policy. We value relationship building and are a trusted source for quality educational materials and webinars. And in fact, we've launched a new program called eForward that helps you learn how to electrify your life. So we look forward to sharing that out with you all as well. We empower people through trainings and resource sharing that helps more voices be heard in decision-making. And we do all of this in service of creating resilient communities, a sustainable economy, and healthy people and landscapes. Before we dive in, I wanted to say a few words about legislative work and why we think it's so important. OEC works on public policy because it's really, really critical for upstream's systems change. And especially right now, with the federal rollbacks, state-level work is essential for continuing to move forward. We want to prevent harm before it happens, and we also want to make sure that we're creating programs that serve all of Oregon. Our founders back in 1968 recognized early on that there needed to be a voice for the environment and healthy communities and statewide decision-making. And we have a board that is made up of members from throughout Oregon, and we want to have those regional touch points. We've been really happy to visit a lot of places over the last couple of years and listen back and hear how people are talking about issues that are rising in their own backyards. OEC not only helps pass meaningful policy, but we also stick with it through implementation and we watchdog progress. Now, doing legislative work is really fascinating because each session has its own personality and its own issues, both big and small, to navigate. And I was thinking it feels a lot like trying to run an obstacle course, but also on a gymnastics balance beam. There is a lot to deal with along the way. But one of the reasons OEC is really successful at doing this work is because of our phenomenal staff. Our program directors know their issues inside and out. They work long hours to get to the Capitol and be there in person to testify. They take meetings with a lot of different stakeholders, and they do a lot to set other people up for success in testifying and also meeting with decision makers. We're also incredibly lucky to work with legislators, many of whom are champions for health and well-being, as well as people in the business community. And I'm so incredibly proud of our team and the work that they did this session. Getting ready for a long session requires a lot of planning. We started over a year ago writing concepts. We set up critical coalitions to make progress, and our partners and allies are really key to success as well. So we appreciate all the hard work and alignment along the way. As we kick off this conversation, I want to let folks know that you can submit questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar screen. Given that we only have an hour today, we may not be able to get to everyone's questions, but we'll do our best. And now I'd like to welcome our other guest to the webinar. I'm delighted to have Thomas Baker join us. Thomas previously served as OEC's legislative director and has 15 years, well now probably 16 plus years of government affairs work, including serving as Senator Burdick's chief of staff in the Oregon State Capitol. He studied political science and economics at Portland State University and received a certificate in European policymaking from the University of Washington. Thomas now owns and runs Cascadia Public Affairs and represents OEC and many of our coalitions in this past legislative session. Welcome, Thomas. Thank you so much for your leadership and collaboration this session. So as we begin, Thomas, I'm hoping we can just really zoom out and kind of start from the beginning and give us a high-level overview of this 2025 session. There were clearly some strong headwinds leading into this with a lot of federal disruption, but also some opportunities for progress. But let's start with the basics. What were the numbers like in each chamber, and how new or seasoned were leaders coming into this session?
Yeah, no, great question. I just want to say that thank you for the introduction, Jan. I can't believe how long I've been doing this, and I can't believe this is our third or fourth one together. Member debrief, and always excited to be here to do this with OEC and our members. This has had to been one of the more wild sessions that I've worked on with you. Coming into this, we had high hopes. The Democrats had supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. Supermajority is important because in order to raise new revenue, you need a three-fifths vote. However, supermajorities are not quorum proof. And as many of our members know, Oregon has had issues with walkouts, and we have a really high threshold for a quorum. We're one of four states, us, Indiana, Tennessee, and Texas, that require two-thirds of our representatives or senators to be present to conduct business. So to put that into just real numbers, out of 60 House members, we need 36 to raise revenue, which was so important for a lot of the work we had to do this session because we didn't have revenue to do it. And the Democrats had just 36 seats in the House. And on the Senate side, we need 18 to raise revenue, and we had just 18 seats, Senate Democrat seats over there. We needed 40 to be quorum proof on the House and 20 to be quorum proof on the Senate side. So the Democrats fell just short over there. So on top of all that, we had new legislative leaders, a new speaker, a new Senate Majority Leader, a new House Majority Leader, and we had new chairs serving out in committees. So it was going to be a challenging session, just to say the least, with fear of walkouts. Can caucus stay together to pass these revenue measures? How will new leadership handle these challenges?
Thanks, Thomas. And I really appreciate just sort of like the nuts and bolts and how Oregon is both similar to some other states, but also different in other ways as well, because each of these factors weighs into kind of the political negotiations and other things as well. And then I'll just note that, OEC is a nonpartisan nonprofit. We don't do electoral work, but we really do a lot of advocacy, and we work across the aisle as much as we can. And we also know how numbers shake out really impacts sort of the flavor of a session. How would you describe what this session's personality was like, or kind of an overall kind of, the fingerprint of it?
Yeah. So we had really several headwinds that created for a challenging session. First, we had the federal elections, and from that, the fallout of federal funding getting cut to a lot of states. And so we were already facing revenue shortfalls, which I'll get into in a minute. Also, I think that while we do a lot of bipartisan work and we have a lot of legislators we work with on both sides of the aisle, so we do good work with, I think we can all agree that it's been very chaotic at the federal level. There's been a lot of uncertainty. We've seen that in the markets. We've seen that with tariffs. How much are they going to be? How small? When are they going to affect? When they don't? Every time these are announced, it makes it really hard for markets to adjust, for corporations to plan expansions, which means we've seen layoffs in the States. We've seen companies hold off on making investments here because of the federal cuts and the layoffs and the chaos of the markets. We've been talking a lot about recession in our state forecast and the possibility of it. And it's also created an environment where I think our state economists and our lawmakers, and quite frankly, the other constituencies wanting to be more conservative with resources. So we have this at the very high level, and then underneath that, without any of this problem, these problems being created at the federal level, Oregon has a broken revenue system, has a heavy reliance on an income tax. We have property tax caps, and we have the Oregon kicker, which is uniquely Oregon. Um, and without getting too deep in the weeds on why this system is an outsider for most states and how it impacts us, law lawmakers are basically handicapped on how much they can raise revenue. Like in some states, if they need to do a transportation package with a sales tax, they can just say, like, we're going to add a half a penny, and it's something that's more manageable, easier to vote on, and they can get the revenue they need. Well, it's really hard when our revenue tax system is set up the way it is, or we're handicapped on how much we can actually keep of what we get in before we have to give it back in the form of a tax rebate. And so because of this, we had a shortfall in K through 12 education funding, shortfall in Medicaid funding. We were looking at how to take care of wildfire funding, and then we had a huge shortfall in transportation funding. And then we had all this federal money cut. Now we have economic uncertainty on top of all of it. And just tackling one of these issues, K through 12, in this environment would be challenging. We had all four of these, and we have new leadership and new chairs and and all this uncertainty. So it really was a challenging. We knew it was going to be a very challenging session going into this.
Yeah, this one did feel historic in many ways and not always for the right reasons, perhaps. But I do want to make sure that we kind of dive into the things that OEC was championing this year. And our organization works across four different issue areas. And so I'd love to kind of step through each of them because each of them has their own dynamics and nuances. We were able to make forward progress, and there also continues to be some unfinished business along the way. But I want to start with one that feels really important and where some significant progress was made, and that's on water. So OEC has been working on water for decades. Um, we are somewhat unique in our focus on both combining how we improve water quality and water quantity, which means that we have to track the actions of 14 different state agencies that touch different pieces of the water puzzle. And this is also where we do a lot of deep partnership work in rural parts of the state. Our program director, Karen Lowatsky, has also served on the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area Committee, which is trying to tackle some nitrate pollution in the region. And she's been doing that for 8 years. And we have worked on water again and again and again. And so it was very exciting, actually, to see that some significant progress was made. And this is difficult, right? Water is so important for so many things: fish and farms and tribes and economic development and even new housing. And so how the state manages water resources, both now and into the future, is going to be really, really important. So I want to touch on one of the bigger wins of this session, which came down to sort of the last day of session. But I was hoping that you could talk about Senate Bill 1154, the Groundwater Management Act reform, and just touch on why it was significant and what it took to get it over the finish line.
Yeah, that was a huge win. It's years in the making, and as you noted, water is so critical to so many of us for different reasons. Whether you're outdoors when you have a farm, just what we drink, fish. So it's a very hot topic in the capital, and usually any kind of movement in this area is not something that's done overnight. It takes a lot of different stakeholders really having to come to the right place with a lot of compromises. And so 1154 was years in the making. It was focused on groundwater quality improvements. It's incredibly important because 70 to 75% of people throughout Oregon rely on groundwater for their drinking water. And it's also important for economic development, as you noted. The current voluntary systems that are not clear on authority haven't solved the groundwater contamination problems. And we've seen a lot in the news about tainted drinking water. And so the intent of this bill really was to catch potential problem areas before an aquifer becomes too polluted for drinking water use, to include stronger monitoring and an early warning system, make sure that outreach is tailored on detection and clarifies the roles for different agencies and increases accountability. Groundwater contamination is increasing, and the consequences to our human health and the environment are increasing as well. And this bill went through a lot of modifications over session. There were several times we thought that this bill wasn't going to make it over the finish line. Karen did an absolutely fantastic job with her years of relationships she's developed out in the field, with lawmakers she's worked with over the years, of being a trusted resource. And what we were able in the last week of session do is come out with a bipartisan bill that both Democrats and Republicans supported, that folks in rural areas and urban areas supported, that tribes supported, and we were able to get this historic win over the finish line in a session where many bills that were this big and heavy and controversial at first were not able to do. So that was like a remarkable achievement, I think, for us, for the state, for everyone who worked on it, and certainly another just shout out to Karen because she's been working on this for years.
Yeah, and thank you for your work on this too, Thomas. I think you also brought some really important bipartisan relationships that were really helpful because, again, water is such a critical and emotional resources because livelihoods depend on it, and it is a resource that's under stress, and so we're going to have to continue work around monitoring and measuring and continuing to think about how we make forward progress so that we can really continue to protect people along the way. So the Groundwater Management Act reform was really keynote, really important. We also want to appreciate the governor's office for a lot of the work that they did on that. But there were also a number of other important bills that passed, and I wonder if you could just quickly touch on a few of those as well. And then we know there's still work to be done along the way.
Yeah. No, on 1154, just to be clear, there'll still be a lot of work to be done on groundwater. A lot of what we do in our areas is we get these, you know, decent sized wins, but it's not everything because there's compromise and we continue to build on them. And I also want to just acknowledge there was a lot of work from Senator Taylor and Senator Golden and Representative Helm and Bobby Levy on this. And so Representative Bobby Levy, and we want to thank them for their work on this. If they're out there listening or someone who knows them, we just want to give credit where credit is due. But going back to your other question, we had several other bills that also passed that were really important. We had Senate Bill 830, which expanded septic repair, the septic repair grant program. Unfortunately, it didn't add any new money, but we were able to keep those current and expand it. And I think that was a win in this resource poor environment where there wasn't funding for anything. So we saw a lot of programs get clawed back or cut. So we were able to hold on to that and expand it how it worked. Senate Bill 427 it was a environmental review for water rights transfers. I'll talk about 1153 in a minute, which didn't pass, which is about water transfers, but we were able to make some progress there. Water transfers is it's up there with groundwater quality. This is a very hot topic and something that's really difficult to move forward. So that was a small win, but yet a big win. We had also House Bill 3525, which we can now have private well testing disclosure by landlords for rental properties, so people know what they're drinking, and that was a huge win for us. And then we had House Bill 2947, which is a bill that will allow for testing of PFAS and biosolids. Biosolids, of course, is a critical resource for fertilizing fields. PFAS are forever chemicals that are in everything. We're now learning they're microplastics and they show up in our waste and they don't come out of the environment. So we want to see how much of it is a part of our biosolid waste and how it moves through the environment. And so that will help give us critical information on next steps on how we want to handle that because it is a really important resource to be using.
That's great. Thank you, Thomas. There's so much more to talk about on water, and there will be some blogs that OEC is releasing and some end of session wrap up. So we hope our readers continue to tune in to our newsletters, and we'll give more information along the way. I'm going to move us along to climate and clean energy. And this is, of course, a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and how I came to OEC is through our climate program director position 15 years ago now. But I wanted to kind of zoom out again a little bit just to talk about the urgency of this moment and what climate, clean energy, and energy justice advocates are really leaning into and against. So we know that climate impacts are intensifying both here and around the country and around the globe. And I wanted to take a moment right now just to acknowledge the heartbreak of what's going on in Texas with the flooding, and the link there being that a hotter atmosphere can hold more water, and that intensifies storms. And for every Oregon family that has had to deal with wildfires and evacuations and losses, I think we can feel deep empathy for what many families and communities are going through right now. And I think it's critically important that we continue to connect on that humanity level with one another as we deal with these disruptions. So our hearts really go out to the families and communities in Texas right now as well. So climate advocates have also really been feeling a lot of pinch at the federal level. There have been a number of executive orders that have gone out and a lot of efforts to claw back federal funding. And so there is a simultaneous need to continue to play defense, but also move things forward. And in the meantime, we have systems that need to be updated and modernized. And so this year, a big part of the focus was really thinking about critical infrastructure and how we do implementation along the way. So we have strong clean energy goals in the state. We have transportation electrification goals as well. But really, a clean grid is a backbone to decarbonizing the rest of the economy. And so a lot of the conversation this year was about how we continue to modernize the grid, and some good progress was made there. We were able to collectively help get a bill through that helps to add more, it's called grid enhancing technologies, but help make better use of existing lines and infrastructure so that it can carry more power and move it around more nimbly, which is a really important part of the equation. On the flip side of that, we were not able to get through a bill that would have created a regional transmission authority that would then have really helped move forward new development of transmission lines. And this is going to be something we're going to have to keep coming back to again and again, because clean energy lives in different places than fossil energy did in the past, and it's more distributed. And so we're going to need new power lines that are built, and we're going to need to accelerate both the deployment of clean energy as well as the energy infrastructure that moves it back to where we need it to be. So we recognize that's unfinished business. We know that that's really important that we continue that conversation. And we're really excited about some of the progress that was made in making better use of the existing infrastructure we have. The other piece of this puzzle is thinking about, as days get hotter, as we encounter a lot of more climate impacts, we also want to make sure that energy remains affordable. And so there was a very close conversation with environmental justice partners and energy advocates to think about how rates are set, what some of those pressures are, when rates can be increased, because we don't want people to face higher rates at times that are higher energy use needs, whether it's in the wintertime or the summertime, when we know we need either more heating or more cooling. And so thanks to the leadership of the Citizens Utility Board and Verde and many environmental justice advocates, some really important bills were passed that change how we're able to set rates and how we apportion out who pays for different types of critical infrastructure as well. So that will be a continuing conversation for many climate justice advocates. The big place that I want to acknowledge that really felt hard is that the Oregon legislature did not move forward with a climate budget this year. And this was a very, very complicated conversation with so much of the interactions at the federal level. So coming into the session before the election, Oregon had been awarded $200 million for a climate pollution reduction grant and had really been banking on those dollars to help really sustain many of the programs that we care about. And those federal dollars are different than what the state had set up. And so we are in this very difficult moment of having some federal dollars come through for some things, but not everything. And facing the reality that many of the programs we fought so hard to set up in 2023 will be sunsetted because of lack of state funding. And this is a critical gap, and it's something that we're going to have to keep addressing. And there's no way to sugarcoat the fact that some of those dollars didn't come through. So we'll continue to work with partners and allies and how we keep programs moving forward, and that we help people in this transition, whether it's businesses, households, or rural partners. So kind of a mixed bag on the climate front. Some important progress made, but also clearly a lot more that needs to be done. Thomas, is there anything else that you would add to that conversation?
Yeah, no, I think that what I notice is that, and this is important for our members to hear, is that I think it's easy to take for granted that we live in a blue state with a lot of lawmakers who care about climate. I think that's true, but I think there's so many challenges in front of them with housing and schools that we have to continue in our communities elevating the conversation of the importance of climate, and this is important, and we have to keep this on lawmakers' radar and make sure that they're staying engaged on this issue and it doesn't fall behind, and that we're not taking for granted that, we have we've done so much to be a leader that we have to continue this work because we're now falling behind as a state, and it's really upon us to make sure that we're elevating that at town halls and making that something that's on lawmakers' radars.
Thanks, Thomas. I'm going to move us on to our toxics reduction work, which was another place where some progress was made and some unfinished business remains. But this, I just want to emphasize again how critical state level work is on this. And within weeks of the federal government rolling back standards on PFAS, Oregon took action to actually phase out a critical source of PFAS. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the progress made and then what we have set the stage for going forward as well.
Yeah. Well, first, I'll start where we kind of set the stage, made some progress, but we didn't quite get to where we wanted to at the end of session. And that was House Bill 3512, which would have started phasing PFAS out of a bunch of consumer products. And there's a couple states already ahead of us. We brought this bill in. It was really good table setting conversation. We've already had a lot of great engagement with a number of stakeholders. Uh, just due to certain timing issues, we weren't able to get as far as we wanted on it, but we've made a lot of progress and we're working with key lawmakers and stakeholders on what parts of this bill we can continue on, where we think we could have success in this short session and where we can have success going into next long session. And so while we weren't able to move that all the way through, we knew that in the beginning. We knew this was going to be an opportunity for us to set the stage, see where the hurdles were, and help us roll out our longer plan. Where we did have success, and was on Senate Bill 91, which phased out PFAS out of firefighting foam over the next year. We know that this has been a very dangerous substance. That our first responders had a lot of different types of medical issues from it, and so this was a great bill where we had bipartisan support and something that the state needed to do, and we were able to actually pass that out through session really early, and that was a fantastic win for our environmental health program.
Yeah, and I want to just appreciate and thank so much the partnership with firefighters and really um, elevating the importance of this. Firefighters do have above average rates of cancer because of their exposure to both materials that they use to fight fires, but then, of course, toxics that are released along the way. And it's really, really critical that people hear from, people on the front lines of these impacts. This was a place, again, where because of the revenue situation that you laid out at the beginning, we would have loved to have seen some resources attached to this, but we're really proud of the progress made on this to take this step of phasing out and not adding more burden to this problem. And there are safer alternatives, and we're really proud to be part of creating demand for better and safer alternatives going forward as well. So we're really excited about the conversation that was started around PFAS phase out and really excited to see where we can go in the future as well.
Can I give a shout out to Senator Solomon and Senator Neuron Mislin, who have been just champions in this area and have really helped out on this front. We're really thankful for all of their work and engagement on this issue.
Yeah, yeah, true champs on these issues. Absolutely. I'm keeping a little bit of an eye on the clock. I just want to remind our participants that you're welcome to submit questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar. We'll be monitoring them along the way and want to make time for Q&A at the end. But we have a really big topic to tackle. And it is one that has consumed a lot of time and energy, both for Oregon Environmental Council, but also our coalition partners at Move Oregon Forward. We've been preparing for a transportation package conversation for well over a year. Transportation packages come around every so often. I've been through two in my tenure at OEC, and each one is very complicated and nuanced along the way. And this one was quite dynamic. Thomas, you were at the center of a lot of these conversations, both helping coalition partners, being a thought partner to legislators as well. And what I'm hoping we can do is kind of, again, zoom out a little bit and just sort of note some of the topic or the process along the way, how our coalition showed up and where we were called upon to provide support and input, and then how this all played out at the end.
Yeah, wow. Let's start on all this. So transportation packages, so you know, they're not something we do every session. They come about every several years. Last time we worked on one, we started in 2015. We ended up passing it in 2017. Um, they are incredibly expensive. They're incredibly complicated, as you noted, and there's everyone in the Capitol is participating on this, and there's a lot of diverse opinions, and so they're very hard to do and pass. Leading up to this year, lawmakers and the co-chairs of, especially the co-chairs of the Transportation Committee, realized this. They tried to get an early jump on this process by starting well after the short session. They did a series of road shows throughout the summer. We put together the Move Oregon Forward Coalition, which was, I think, by the time we wrapped up, the end of session was over 50 groups that came together over a number of priorities, which kind of fell into the umbrella of safety, climate, and transit. We engaged in this roadshow. We were a key stakeholder in this process, along with cities and counties and Metro and TriMet and AAA. And we had really fantastic engagement from our supporters, which was really important through the roadshow. And that roadshow, the work leading up to session, really set the table. And I can't put a finer point on this because I want folks who listen know that their voice matters. That when we came into session, lawmakers heard loud and clear that how important transit is to the state, how important climate priorities and prioritizing electrification is going to be important to the state, and safety investments, multimodal investments that make it possible to have transportation freedom, to be able to get around on bike or walk or scooter, whatever it is, and have safe ways to get around. Like that was also going to be extremely important. So this was one of the few places where we had some headwinds going into session. Um, but of course, easier said than done because again, we had huge revenue shortfalls. And to fund a lot of these things, there need to be a series of new taxes. Um, Unfortunately, in Oregon, we don't have one stable source of funding to take care of things. A lot of states rely on various types of tolling. Um, I believe there's at least one state in general, I believe it's Hawaii, that has a road user fee charge for most, if not all, of its cars. And a lot of states have a sales tax, as I mentioned earlier, that they can just dial up a tiny bit. But we don't have any of those options really. We have a very small road user fee program. Most of the conversations around tolling, for reasons we don't have to get into, have been put on hold. And so we're at a handicap of how much we could raise in revenue, which made putting together a transportation package that everyone could really feel good about, very challenging. But that said, lawmakers did put together a package that checked a lot of boxes. We saw historic funding and safety multimodal transportation. We saw an increase in transit funding to preserve transit and to hopefully continue to build on. Although we would like to see a higher number because we feel like there needs to be more transit routes. And then at the very end of session, electrification was a really challenging topic for this particular committee and for lawmakers and for getting additional funding. We saw a modest increase there. However, I think as many people who followed along in the news saw that at the last minute, there was the package lacked a couple votes to get over the finish line, and it fell apart. And there was a last ditch effort at the very end to do a very like an austerity package. It was going to be just we'll raise the gas tax by 3 cents, and we'll do what we have to do to cover ODOT jobs and to keep things going. Well, if that happened, I think there was a pretty much unanimous agreement in the building by all the various stakeholders that worked on this package, including most of the lawmakers on the committee, that it would be really tough to come together and get a package like that was close within a couple of votes of passing, that did everything that we really need to do, to make the investments that the state need to be making. And let me just go back in time a little bit to the 2017 package. There's still stuff from there that we haven't done yet. So we're behind the curve. We couldn't yet again go even further behind as a state. So, long story long, we were able to put together enough opposition to stop that the Band-Aid solution and say, look, let's not lose all this hard work that we've done. Let's try to come back together in a few months for a special session and see if we can find those key votes and see what little tweaks we have to make to this package to get across the finish line and make sure that we're not continuing to fall behind. Because the more we fall behind, the more expensive our road maintenance becomes, the more expensive our infrastructure becomes, and the harder it's going to be to set Oregon up to be free from fossil fuels and to be able to have the kind of transportation system where we can all move around freely, affordably, and being able to reduce the harms to our climate. So I'll pause there, Jana. I'm sure I didn't cover it all. I'm sure you have questions, but hopefully that's a good overview of one of the big things we worked on this session.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thomas. This one, I mean, I feel like we could spend an entire hour just talking about this. But I think continuing to really underscore and affirm the values around a safe, affordable, the livability that comes from a good transportation system. And of course, it has to be climate smart because, again, climate crisis actually makes keeping up our transportation system more expensive. It shortens the life of roads and bridges, right? When we have extreme heat and extreme weather. And so we firmly feel that all the work done to help create a multimodal system that allows people to bike and walk and ride transit safely is absolutely critical. And so it's a smart investment for the state to make, as well as transportation electrification, because that's how you cut out the fossil fuel pollution. And also tailpipe pollution continues to be a major source of air toxics in the state as well. So we will continue to advocate for those parts and pieces as we go into this next conversation. We do have some questions coming in on the Q&A. But before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about civic engagement and how important it is that people continue to stay engaged, that people continue to connect with decision makers. And I want to speak a little bit to the role that OEC and our program staff and our communications staff really play in helping to turn people out and make sure that voices from around the state are heard. Because I'm really proud of a lot of the work that was done we're able to help support 3 advocacy days that had hundreds of people turning out. There were bilingual interpreters for some of the meetings that we held. There were rallies outside the Capitol. And just so folks know, another factor, the Capitol is still under construction. And so whereas we used to be able to hold some really great tabling events inside the Capitol Rotunda, everything now has to be really held outside the Capitol. Someday that construction will be done. So there's different logistics to have to plan around, but really inspiring to see so many people turn out. We were able to make sure that people connected with legislators in nearly every single legislative district, followed up on over 77 bills, which require writing testimony, talking to legislators, having meetings, checking in with other partner groups as well. We sent out over 20 action alerts, which again take time and effort to think about what's the messaging, who's the target, where is something in the process. And often we have to follow the same bill through different chambers and different committees. And then anything that had revenue associated with it always goes through another step. So over 1,600 emails were sent to legislators, and this is where it's so important. And I can't underscore enough again how critically important it is that legislators hear from people about these issues. Even the ones that we know are with us need to hear from you and hear that these are priorities. So for everyone who took an action, for everyone who sent in an email or clicked on an action alert list, thank you. Every single one of the wins that we mentioned today are due in part to your work and your effort. It's going to continue to be important to keep elevating these issues, even outside of legislative sessions at town halls and other places. And we really encourage you to join us, join our action alert list, and we'll let you know when there are critical moments to weigh in. Thank you for the staff who also helped at OEC to assemble all the stats. There's a lot that goes on for each and every one of these efforts and actions. I'm going to go ahead and turn to some of the Q&A, and then Thomas will be able to join us again in a moment. But there were a couple of questions around on the climate side, which of our programs are we worried about phasing out? There are some around incentives that we helped set up, incentive programs that we helped set up in 2023. So there were a couple of programs that we really had hoped would get additional funding. One was around incentives for heat pumps. Heat pumps are incredibly efficient, almost 300 times more efficient than other HVAC systems. And they give you both heating and cooling. And life-saving cooling is really critically important. But there is an upfront cost to putting in a new heat pump system. Federal incentives are going to be phasing out, and Oregon had a really unique program to help landlords also install heat pumps. And sometimes it's really hard to overcome the split incentive between who pays for electricity and then who actually owns the equipment. So the program that Oregon set up previously, it was sold out in literally a day. And so we know there's huge demand for it. And we're really sorry not to see additional funding for that particular heat pump program go forward. Similarly, there was a program set up that creates climate resilience hubs around the state. Many community groups help make sure that there are safe places, whether it's in extreme heat, if you need charging, if your power goes out. So these resilience hubs, which can be community centers that can provide services in multiple languages, provide childcare, critical services. It's really important that we have these safe harbor spaces around the state. And unfortunately, no new additional funding was provided for that program. And similarly, we were hoping that there would be some new funding for community-based renewables. And there continues to be a little bit of funding from the past allocation that will continue to play out, but we hope that new dollars can be added over time there as well, and that the state not lose the critical staff members that help run those programs. Let me see, I'm going through a couple of other questions here. There's some questions about updating the state's climate goals. This has been something that has been put in front of the legislature a couple of times. The legislature has not updated the state goals. However, in 2020, when Governor Brown put forward an executive order, it did help put in place a program based on existing state authority that is very well established. The ability to put in place a climate protection program. And in that program, which caps major sources of climate pollution in the state, new goals and targets were set that really help line up with what science says is necessary. And so the climate protection program will continue to be a really, really critical one in helping the state achieve its climate reduction goals and targets. And that program also helps generate some proceeds that can be reinvested back in Oregon and especially in vulnerable communities to make sure that we are reducing emissions and also creating community benefit throughout the state. Thank you to this questioner about what is PFAS. So we recognize that a lot of this work can get very technical pretty quickly. PFAS, and I will not say the full chemical name, but there are classes of chemicals. PFAS and PFOA were industrial chemicals. They were put in place and they soften plastics and they also create water repellents. And so you find them in all sorts of consumer goods. Unfortunately, they also don't break down biologically and they accumulate in our bodies. And there is incredibly well-established science around the link between exposure to them and a whole range of cancers, impacts on our thyroids, our development, especially for kids as they're growing up. And there are many, many healthy substitutes or places where they're not necessary. So even things like cooking on a cast iron pan rather than a Teflon nonstick pan reduces your exposure. So OEC actually is just releasing a PFAS-free buying guide for folks. It's just out in the world just now. So we encourage you to continue to look to OEC for some resources about how to protect yourself from some of these toxics that lurk in many consumer products. And we'll continue to do the good public policy work we need to do upstream to make sure that we're protected along the way as well. Thomas had mentioned that, and there's questions about what comes next on the transportation package. So we don't have any announcements yet on when there might be a special session, but we know that both the governor, cities and counties, transit districts are very, very worried about budgets for transportation workers and really concerned about layoffs. And again, when it comes to losing the historical knowledge and the skill sets, we don't want to lose workers along the way. So we are still waiting to hear from leadership to get back into a special session. Requires the governor and the leaders of the House and Senate and a sense of having a quorum available. We know a lot of legislators are taking a little bit of a deep breath right now. In the couple of weeks after session, they also deserve a chance to have a break. But we are keeping an ear to the ground on when a special session might happen. It's possible September is the timeline that is rumored out there, but we'll certainly let all of you know as soon as we know, because it's important that we continue this conversation and have it be a much more holistic transportation conversation because there are needs across all of these sectors. One topic that we did not touch on, but has come up in the Q&A section is what about wildfires and wildfire funding? And Thomas touched on this at the very beginning of session, or not session, but of this, this debrief, that the need for wildfire funding was one of the pressure points this session. So wildfire costs have increased in Oregon. So fighting fires has gotten more expensive. We have more of them to fight. We don't have a sustained funding mechanism for how to deal with that. And there have been changes to how board feet or taxed, and how we manage lands along the way. And so, unfortunately, I would say that there was not necessarily a complete solution put forward about how to really pay for wildfire costs. I think this will continue to be an ongoing conversation. Some progress was made. So we need resources to help prevent impact to communities. So there's a lot that needs to be done around just vegetation management around homes and buildings. And there are a lot of regional efforts that are happening, some volunteer work and efforts to help people with that. And then there's just the cost of making sure that we have the equipment and the people power. This is one of those places where I think it's also really important to acknowledge how regions come together. And so there have been times, right, where other states send firefighters to help us fight our fires, and there are times where Oregon sends help and aid to other states around the region as well. But this is going to be an ongoing conversation because the cost of fighting fire is going up. It's also one of the pressures on our electric grid section, and why some rates are also going up, because there's wildfire liability and there's cost to maintaining vegetation along power lines as well. So we expect that we'll continue to see an intersection of wildfire, energy costs, and other issues going forward. All right. Let me look through a few of these as well. Thank you all for your questions. I'm trying to make sure that we get to a couple of different types of questions. I will say, for those of you asking questions about why didn't people vote for a transportation package? If we had all of those answers, we would probably all be millionaires. There is a lot of nuance, there's a lot of negotiation. Sometimes misinformation comes in at the end of session. One of the things that did happen is that the transportation package came out rather late in session, and I think didn't give enough time for people to really understand what was in it, what was changing, what some of the mechanisms were. And so it is going to take a little more time for people to understand all of the different mechanisms along the way. Also, there's sometimes horse trading that happens. I mean, that's pure politics, right? And in the past, in the 2017 session, it was very interesting that there were more resources on the table. And so special projects and different districts could be paid for. And that helped bring votes along. And the revenue situation was just very, very different this session. So there's probably more than one answer to the question about why people didn't vote for the transportation package, or how they weren't able to get everything together. But I think, as Thomas noted, there were only a couple of votes shy of passage. So we don't feel like things have to be reinvented. We can keep going on the same route that we were on, with some tweaks around the edges. But again, we really feel like this needs to be a very holistic conversation, because there's holistic needs around the state to meet. All right. There's a great question from some of our partners about critical issues and bills for health from this session, and which ones we would really elevate. And I will just say that I think for OEC, we really try and look at that intersection between health and the environment and people, and that nearly all of our priorities really touch on health in critically important ways. If we just touch on transportation again, reducing tailpipe pollution is a major source of helping to protect people's health. Really thinking about groundwater resources and contamination and making sure people are drinking clean water, that's also really important for people's health in different ways. Our environmental health work and reducing toxics exposures. The more we learn about PFAS, the more we learn about plastics, the more urgent it becomes to reduce exposures there. We're excited that there was also progress made on a plastic bag ban, and making sure that, again, we're finding alternatives to plastics that continue to impact our brains, our bodies, and our kids' development. So we think that those were really important progress that was made as well. And then extreme heat really kills. And so all of our work on climate is really also done through a human health lens. And we think that that's going to continue to be important as we face impacts, that we have ways to keep people safe along the way. Thank you for that question. I think that health nexus is so important. And for the Allies for a Healthy Oregon, you do so much great intersectional work. And thank you for all that you're doing. It looks like, oh, we had a question come up around what about some of the other bills? When we're talking about funding, there were some bills that were about holding large polluters accountable. There is something called a climate superfund bill, which acknowledges, and other states have been testing out this method, just like the tobacco industry needed to help contribute to health and well-being going forward because their product was so damaging and they knew about it. Similarly, the fossil fuel industry has known about climate disruption for a very long time. They have profited from the use of fossil fuels, and now we as a society are paying for the damages. Everyone's home insurance could be impacted by climate change, right? The costs are going up, the cost of fighting wildfires, the cost of maintaining water infrastructure, the costs of maintaining roads. These are all public goods, public infrastructure. And they're all being impacted by the climate crisis. And so we think it will be really important to continue to monitor along the way ways to continue to help make sure that those who are responsible for the problem are helping to pay for cleanup. And we really appreciate the conversation that was started around those topics this year. The Climate Superfund bill did not move forward, but we are excited to continue that conversation as well. Well, folks, we're so pleased to have all of you join us. Thank you again for all of the work that our change makers, our action takers took. I want to take a few moments at the end just to say thank you and to share again that OEC's mission is to champion equitable, innovative, and collaborative solutions to Oregon's challenges today and for future generations. Our work is 100% funded by generosity of our members, and we could not continue this good work without your support. Please consider supporting OEC and standing strong for Oregon's environment. With members at our side, OEC has worked for more than 55 years. That's 55 legislative sessions and beyond to address critical issues like toxic air pollution, water scarcity, and the impacts of the climate crisis. You can donate at oeconline.org, and your investment into Oregon's environment will help us continue to protect our beautiful home for years to come. Thank you. And thank you again for everyone who participated in this year's legislative session, for speaking up to friends and neighbors about the importance of ongoing action, and especially for taking care of each other through volatile times. Community is so important, and our caretaking, our resilience will help sustain us now and going forward. OEC is here for you, and we are so proud to partner with you all in this critical work. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.